Yes. Yeah, you can just send it to us, and we can just, like the same thing we do with the presentations. But sometimes, I think, Kim sometimes reads written correspondence, or is actually supposed to. But the correspondence we had from that meeting was, you saw it, it was super long. And she did read some of them, I thought. Or for some.
Okay, I'd like to call the Thursday, April 12th Regional Planning Governing Board meeting to order. Could we start with a roll call, please?
Jenny Breckus, absent. Naomi Dewar, absent. Paul McKenzie. Here. Marsha Burke-Bigler. Here. Charlene Bybee.
Here.
David Bobzine.
Here.
Donald Abbott. Here. Christopher Dare for Ed Lawson. Here. Vaughn Hartung, absent. Jean Herman. And non-voting member Veronica Frankel.
Okay, I know that Councilwoman Breckus is on her way. Councilwoman Dewar, I think, has a challenging schedule. We may or may not see her. That's where we are. Let's do the salute to the flag. Could we have Councilmember Sharon Zadra lead us in the pledge this afternoon?
I guess we still have a quorum, huh?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, approval of the agenda. Mr. Azevedo, do you have any updates for us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. At your request, the item 6E is to be pulled. We're addressing the budget, and the rest of the agenda remains the same.
Okay, thank you. And the purpose of pulling that is a little more staff level conversation before we go forward with the consideration of the budget. So with that, I'd entertain with that change, a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Burke-Bigler, a second from Councilmember Abbott. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Approval of the minutes from February 8th, 2018. Any issues or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Item 5, public comment. Do we have any public comment this afternoon?
Yeah, I have 2 today. I have Tammy Holdstill, and then after that will be Donna Klons.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Oh, perfect.
Good afternoon. Tammy Holstill, is it on? I don't think it's on.
Nope, hold on 1 second there. There we go.
Good afternoon, Tammy Holstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee. The water's still there. I'm still here for the record. It's too bad that Commissioner Hartong's not here. I wanted to address a couple issues that was brought to my attention. First of all, when he was talking about only 22 acre feet, for the people that have not heard what I've been talking about, Washoe County and the city of Reno partnered together to pump Prado Ranch, which is city property, over to the lake side. It ended up being about 7 million gallons. He felt that, and so did Washoe County staff, feel that was insignificant. Well, even though it was 7 million gallons, he put it down to it was only 22 acre feet. Well, 22 acres in an 1,800 acre area that is already overflooded, he's not taking into account disbursement, he's not taking, or displacement and force. And that there's areas and residents who are not being protected that the water is coming back up onto. So I wanted to address that. Also, it has come to my attention that staff and some commissioners are tired of hearing from us residents in Lemon Valley. And comes back to the First Amendment. We have the right to be here to talk. Also, second, if the right thing was being done and the water was being addressed, we wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be listening to us. But when Bedell Flats is not a done issue, because $75,000 has been spent and there's no permitting out there, BLM is not permitting it, and this is as of 2015, we're sitting here like this. You guys are spinning your wheels and you're not going anywhere. You put your eggs all in one basket and it's not going anywhere. And then you want to bring into the fact that for the commissioners who have not been around for a while or had not seen or heard what's going on, In our research, we have found in 1996, the city of Reno Washoe County, in conjunction with USGS and EPA, did recharging test demonstration. And in this report, USGS and federal EPA state that Lemon Valley was not a candidate for this recharge. But yet, I have the reports from Tumwa showing that in 2010 forward, that recharging was done in Lemon Valley. And they did not do the science. The science being where they know where the communication is of that aquifer and where that water is going. They don't know. The same with Silver Knolls, and the same with what's happening with White's Lake and the recharge of the aquifer.
Thank you, Ms. Holstill. Ms. Clance, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Donna Clance. I'm Chair of the Reno Senior Citizen Advisory Committee and Vice Chair of the Washoe County Senior Advisory Board. And I wanted to just come and thank the staff of Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency for working with our senior groups. As all of us are, we're very concerned about the affordable housing crisis that's going on in our region, and I see that there are several things on the agenda today that are going to address that. We have so many seniors that are under that minimum ability to be able to afford basically anything and need rental assistance and are in our subsidized housing already, but we also have a very large group of folks that are on fixed incomes that maybe have had the ability to take care of their costs of housing with their Social Security payments, but Social Security is staying relatively flat, and our housing, as you know, is just going through the roof. So everything that everyone is trying to do is so important to all of us, but especially to our seniors that aren't working anymore and are having to exist on the money that they've earned over their careers. The second thing I wanted to say is that both of our groups are engaged in working on the planning piece that Truckee Meadows Regional Planning does, and I wanted to thank your staff, especially Jeremy Smith and Lauren Knox, for giving us their time. They've come to our board meetings, given us really great updated demographic information about folks 50 and over, where they are, what the needs are, what the resources are geographically, and they're helping us use the MetroQuest survey instrument that is paid for in their budget to do some surveying of our senior population. So we really appreciate getting to know them and getting to use some of those resources on behalf of the seniors. So thank you. We're supportive of all of the things you're working on and also the upcoming budget that you'll be working on later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Any further public comment?
Yeah, I believe we have one more. It's Stephen Woolgast.
Okay, good afternoon.
For the record, Steve Walgast, 5220 Cedarwood Drive, Reno. I want to thank this board for the role it serves in long-term, large-scale planning for the area. I further hope that the Washoe County Commission is more responsive to the TMRPA plans and insights. I understand that the Planning Commission is not allowed to consider the cumulative effects of development plans, but must consider them in isolation. As a retired engineer and a layman, this seems irrational. There are 60,000 new dwelling units already approved for the county which have not yet been built. Many are likely built with special PUDs and variances that put them out of compliance with area master plans. It is late now to be emphasizing the long-term area plans, but it must be made a priority. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No further public comments. We'll move to business of the day. Item 6A, consideration and possible ratification of the recommendation of the Washoe County Home Consortium's directors for the allocation of funding for FY 2018-2019 funds for the development of the Sutro Street Senior Apartments, Ridge House on Cambridge, and Vista Point Apartments Rehabilitation Affordable Housing Projects in the amount of $1,223,000.
Thank you, Chair and board members. For the record, Nate Kushner, Regional Planning, and I'll be doing this presentation in conjunction with Silas Scarborough and the folks from the Washoe County Home Consortium. So just a quick background, the Washoe County Home Consortium was created through an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Reno, City of Sparks, and Washoe County for the purposes of receiving and administering the Home Investment Partnership Program funds. The Washoe County Home Consortium is comprised of the Technical Review Committee, which is tasked with making funding recommendations to the Washoe County Home Consortium directors, which are the Reno and Sparks city managers, as well as the Washoe County manager. So for a little bit of the process, first we have the applications for the home funds, which are made and presented to the Technical Review Committee, which then hold a variety of public meetings to make recommendation to the directors of the Washoe County Home Consortium on which projects to fund with the home funds. And then after that, the ratification by the Regional Planning Governing Board is required before the funding allocations can be finalized. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Silas.
Good afternoon, Silas Scarborough, Management Analyst for the City of Reno, staff member to the Washoe County Home Consortium. So we are here today to ratify the funding for affordable housing projects using 2018 fiscal year home funds. Our 2018 home allocation for this year is a little bit more than $1.2 million. That comes from our allocations from the federal and state government. The federal allocation was a little less than $1 million, and our state allocation was around $290,000. So we had 4 applications that came in December of 2017. We held 4 public hearings, 3 with the TRC and 1 with the Washoe County Board of Directors. Our first public hearing was in January, and then we had 2 more in February and March, as well as the Washoe County Board of Directors meeting on March 23rd as well. We had 1 application that withdrew in March. That was for the Gray Haven Apartments in Sparks. They decided to withdraw at the very last public hearing, and so that left us the opportunity to fund the 3 remaining projects in full. So I'm going to briefly talk about the projects. If you have any questions about the technical details, jump in at any time, but I'm not going to go into a real deep dive with each project. But the first project was what we considered to be our priority project, the one that we wanted to make sure received the most funding. It is the Suture Street Senior Apartments. It's the applicant is the Reno Housing Authority. The property is located at the intersection of Suture Street and Friendship Lane. The property would have 44 units. All 44 units would be affordable to seniors at or below 50% of the area median income. In return for the $1 million, what we are suggesting that they receive for the home funds, they would set aside 8 units at very, very low income at 30% AMI. And in return, those units would be affordable for a period of 50 years. So this is the project location. We thought that it was a priority project simply because it did have a proposal to benefit very, very low-income renters, which is an identified need within our consolidated plan. As well as the Reno Housing Authority, they provide a lot of supportive services to the clients, which is the 2 biggest funding priorities for the Washoe County Home Consortium. The second project that we are suggesting to receive funds is the Ridge House in Cambridge. It's at 990 Cambridge Way in South Reno. This is an existing single-family house. It was built in the 1970s. It has been owned and operated by the Ridge House for the past 15 years as a group home. It's a legal and conforming use at that location. They help individuals coming out of the criminal justice system, as well as people that have substance abuse issues. And Ridge House also provides supportive services to their clients as well. The clients here are generally very, very low income and very at risk of homelessness. they asked for a forgivable loan so that if they meet the requirements of the home consortium for 15 years, then the consortium would forgive that loan, and staff is recommending approval of that. The house has never really been updated. It needs a complete redo from the interior to the exterior. Our main concern is any health and life and safety issues. Those have to be fixed first before any more cosmetic work can be done on the house. But we think that $123,000 will be, every penny will be used to benefit those clients, and it's a good use of home consortium funds. And Ridge House is a community development housing organization, so they fulfill our charter requirement for our home funds. And this is just an exterior shot. The house has some exterior cladding issues. Some of the vinyl siding needs to be repaired. We're not exactly sure about the roof, but there may be some roof repairs that need to be made as well. The last project is the Vista Point Apartments. It's in North Reno at North Virginia Street and Tallis Way. This is an existing tax credit property. It has 44 units. It was built in the year 2000 using low-income tax credits from the state of Nevada. So all the units there are actually affordable at 60% or below of AMI. But in return for a loan of $100,000 for this project, they would give us 9 units, all affordable at 50% or below of AMI. So that is also very low income. One thing that we learned in our due diligence of this project is a lot of times these tax credit properties, after the 15-year investor period ends, the tax credit investor can leave the project, and also they can take the operating reserves out of the unit as well. So that left the new owners with a deficit to make long-term capital repairs to the project. Talking with the state, it appears that they've changed that rule so that when the tax credit investor leaves, they can't take the operating reserves with them as well. So the new owners are looking for a way to make some cash infusion to fix up the property. They have a lot of common areas, need new flooring, as well as they need the buildings just need exterior paint as well. They do want to do exterior lighting on the buildings as well. Talking with the property management company, that FPI Property Management is the property management for that, for the Vista Point Apartments, but they also manage other units in Reno that have home units. So we're confident that they understand the home rules and then the monitoring requirements, and so that they have somebody on site that can provide us the information to make sure that the units are occupied by home eligible residents and that they will maintain the property according to home standards. It is it's the 2 buildings there in the blue ink. And that's just new. And then the motion was just simply to move to ratify the allocation of $1,223,000 for the fiscal year 2018 home projects. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, any questions or discussion on the item? Seeing none, entertain a motion. Councilwoman Bybee.
I move to ratify the allocation of $1,223,000 of home program fiscal year 2018-2019 funds for the Sutro Street Senior Apartments, Ridge House on Cambridge, and Vista Point Apartments rehabilitation affordable housing projects as described in this staff report and accompanying attachments.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilwoman Bybee and a second from Councilmember McKenzie. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Item 6B, presentation and update regarding the Truckee Meadows Regional Affordable Housing Strategy efforts from Enterprise Community Partners. Welcome back, everybody.
Thank you. It is good to be back. We have been working diligently, even aggressively, on this project that, again, we appreciate your support and concurrence that affordable housing is indeed a priority for our community. And we are about 3/4 of the way through phase 1 of our 3-phase project, and we've collected your individual from your entities, your managers, as well as your senior staff have been incredibly supportive and forthcoming, identifying issues and concerns and opportunities. And we will share some of that information that we've received today. You remember, we have Chris Kizzy from Enterprise and Ann Jordan, who will give you kind of an update on where we are and what phase 2 and 3 will have in store, and the new working groups that we've established to progress further with this project. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Chris Kizzy, Enterprise Community Partners. Happy to be here to provide an update on, as Sharon indicated, where we are in the process, as well as some of the feedback we received to date. Just to remind the governing board of our presentation in February when we were here, want to provide an overview and a recap of that presentation, as well as spend most of the time providing an overview and update of the feedback we've received on this visit, which really gets into how the current tools related to addressing affordable housing challenges in the Truckee Meadows regions and the market conditions, and some of the potential tools that you'll see through the planning process and in the plan that will better equip and build the capacity of the region to address affordable housing challenges. And so we'll spend most of the time there talking about the relationship between the housing market conditions, the existing tools, and then talking through some of the new tools that we'll be presenting today. Just to provide an overview of the recap, as Sharon mentioned, we're about 3/4 of the way through phase 1. Phase 1 is really around understanding the existing conditions, the future trends that are shaping the housing market in the Truckee Meadows region, and also implementing that formal planning structure that's going to be used to inform and guide this planning process and this effort over the next several months. And so phase 1 will end roughly about June timeframe, and out of that process we'll have several deliverables. One is a regional and local community profile so that we understand the impact in the housing market within each of the jurisdictions in the region, as well as extrapolating that up to an understanding of the regional housing market conditions as well. And in addition to that, we're also, as I mentioned, building the formal planning structure. So we've kicked off all of the working groups that we'll discuss today and give you an overview of the feedback from those working groups and their guidance and some of the potential tools and priorities that the region should be looking at over the next several months. So we have an executive leadership team, and I presented last time the vision statement and the core principles that were developed by the executive leadership team, and you see the membership here. And this week, during this trip, we kicked off 2 more working groups. We have a staff working group, which consists of the staff from the various jurisdictions that are really providing that expertise on the ground, what's going on with existing programs, the challenges they're seeing with the current funding tools, and the strategies that are in place today, so to help us guide our process through developing those new tools and strategies to help meet the gaps of where they are today. We also kicked off the Community Leaders Working Group, which is really designed to understand not only the housing needs of the various populations that are affected by the lack of affordable and available housing, but also to understand the trade-offs and the connections between those housing decisions that are impacting low-income households throughout the region. And so to really understand and communicate that and carry that message forward out in the community so that we're educating the community about affordable housing in the Truckee Meadows region, as well as what this planning process is going to yield through strategy, through new tools, and hopefully new funding mechanisms as well. So then this is, again, the vision statement that was developed through the executive leadership team, which we shared with both working groups on this trip and got overwhelming support that this is the right vision to guide this process, to guide the plan, to guide the strategies, and the decisions that are going to be coming forth over the next several months. And so all residents of Truckee Meadows should have access to a continuum of safe, accessible, and affordable housing options in neighborhoods that offer access to opportunity and a high quality of life. And I think that really resonated with all the members of the working groups, as well as some of the other stakeholders we've been working with throughout this process. In addition to preparing that vision statement, the executive leadership team also developed core principles so that as we're evaluating various strategies and various policy decisions to support this effort, that we're constantly revisiting these core principles to make sure we're staying true to them and that we're leveraging the guidance through these core principles to make sure that our strategies and tools are going to be as impactful as possible so that we're true to that vision as well. I also presented last time, we did a high-level SWOT analysis to illustrate the strengths that are currently in the Truckee Meadows region, as well as the opportunities that exist today to kind of leverage those opportunities, as well as the weaknesses and threats. And so through this planning process, we're going to try and build around the strengths that exist today, as well as some of the opportunities that exist today, and build the capacity of the region to address some of the weaknesses and threats that are impacting the housing conditions in the Truckee Meadows region. Share a little bit more about our project approach. We recognize that we're not going to be able to accomplish everything, and the region's not going to be able to accomplish everything right away. And so we're doing a phased implementation approach, recognizing there's some tougher decisions that lie ahead of us and before the board and council as well. And so we want to make sure that we're phasing this right so that we're building the capacity in the short term for the region to respond and address these conditions through cultivating new partnerships, creating a more robust and consistent development environment, as well as targeting some of the current strategies and funding resources to maximize the impact of those resources and show the value of the various investments. And so over the medium and long term, we're then addressing some of those tougher policy questions and creating more public-private partnerships around some of the resources that could be available in the region to assist us in the affordable housing strategy implementation, and then refining that and sustaining that progress over the long term to ensure that this is something that carries forward over the full 10-year vision of the plan and hopefully long after that. Any questions? I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ann, who will give us a comparison of the current tools and housing needs, as well as the market conditions and feedback from the various working groups that we've learned this week on our trip.
Any questions so far? Okay, seeing none.
All right, great.
Hi, everyone. As Chris said, I'm Ann Jordan here with Enterprise. We've had a really great visit and got to meet a lot of different stakeholders that have provided wonderful feedback to frame how our understanding of the current high-level housing needs and market conditions that are shaping the affordable housing shortage in the region right now. We're going to continue to dig into these issues in a much more fine-grained way, more data analysis, getting into the different sub-market variation throughout the region. But our focus on this trip has been at the high level, thinking about the whole region and getting some feedback from the different working groups about how current tools are positioned to address those, and then thinking through what potential tools have been used around the country to address similar conditions. So we'll provide some highlights on what some of those tools may entail, but these are not final recommendations by any means. We're going to be continuing to vet them much further in much more detail as we go, but wanted to give you an update on some of the things that are being tossed around right now. So with that, we'll jump in to the first key trend, which I think has not been surprising to many, given some of the anecdotal evidence we've heard before now about the shortage of affordable rental housing in the region, and how that's particularly concentrated, especially when you're accounting for not just price, but also if they're available to households at that income level. So if they're affordable and available, not occupied by higher income households, seeing that concentrated at 50% of AMI and below, that very low income. And then we know that that's driving people to make some really tough decisions. And so just one example of that is the number of residents living in weekly motels. We saw at the time of the last motel count, more than 3,500 residents living in those weekly motels across Sparks and Reno. And we know that even those options are becoming more limited. So when we started talking with the staff and community leaders about how current tools are positioned to address this, we heard a lot about the importance of mixed income housing, know how difficult it is to get that level of subsidy needed to reach those very low income households. So really thinking about how the new tools around income averaging through LIHTC, the kind of gap financing that's available from the state as great tools, but really for achieving that mixed income so that you can get that balance of rents, both in terms of creating more balanced communities, more inclusive communities, but also to make projects pencil out a little bit more effectively. We also heard just in general the need for financing across the board that came up in probably every meeting that we've had this trip, just in terms of keeping up with the increasing land costs, increasing construction costs, and then the difficulty of also finding the workforce around construction and building to keep up with demand in this increasing market. So some ways we're thinking about that too in terms of infrastructure around supporting more dense housing options and new housing types that may be able to take advantage of types of parcels that are available in those areas that have strong access to services, but maybe are not suitable for the types of development that the region has typically seen. So trying to dig into what that might look like in the future too. So then when we're thinking about potential tools that can help the region address that shortage, the first one, which has gotten a lot of interest in the community, has been around the Regional Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So that would be something that we're talking about has a dedicated source of funding. That's really important for the consistency so developers know that it's out there. It's not just a one-off thing. Also knowing that it can be capitalized not just by public resources, really trying to capitalize on the different types of public and private partnerships and philanthropic investment that can really make that a long-term funding source that's large enough to scale to meet the need and can really grow over time. Then we also have been talking a little bit about inclusionary zoning. No, there's a lot of different concerns around that and want to continue to think through how a policy that really leverages all the great market activity that's going on to also bring some public benefit around affordability and making sure that that's tailored to specific submarket needs. So not just making blanket requirements across the region, but thinking through how when you look at the region, different submarkets may be able to better meet specific needs of certain populations, whether that's on a sliding scale of affordability, but also offset by certain development incentives. So whether that's some things around density or expedited permitting or some process adjustments that make that a little bit easier for developers to sustain, to make sure it's really a full community effort around building more inclusive communities. Then we also talked about public land disposition for affordable housing. And we know that that supply is a little bit limited, but there's also some resources that we've heard some calls to dig into further, whether that's not just the local public land, but also thinking through state, thinking through federal, thinking through whether it's like transfer of development rights, thinking about innovative ways to really capitalize on the land assets to make that expense a little bit easier for developers so that affordability can be brought into more of the projects. And so we know that that's particularly impactful in areas with high land costs, and especially when it's offered transparently. And so thinking through how the region can start inventorying those different assets so that that can be something that's offered to developers on a more consistent basis. So then the next trend that we have here is around the limited housing types in the region. And so we know this is compounding the supply issues that we're seeing. So we weren't entirely surprised to see that there's a large concentration of single-family housing throughout the region. But what was a little more interesting to us was how that's meeting up with current demand. And so we see that there is a rise in 1- and 2-person households throughout the region, making up about 64% of all Truckee Meadows residents. But when you look at what the housing stock is offering, it's only 40% of housing units that are offering less than 3 bedrooms. So that's often putting people in a position of either generally paying too much for a larger house than they needed or wanted. So thinking about ways to right-size that, to maybe alleviate some housing costs and then free those existing units up for people that may fit their needs a little better. And so then when we're talking about the working groups, how this issue has been affected, we heard that there's a kind of a duality of what the current zoning offers, or maybe limits in terms of what may be available for development, but also on the community side, maybe a need for more innovative approaches that aren't typically being offered or proposed right now. So thinking through how to move from kind of cookie cutter developments that are seen already into more innovative housing models that may be able to capitalize on things like maybe those smaller parcels, or thinking through what different design elements can be used to really capture some of that mismatch in the market right now. We heard that accessory dwelling units may be a potential solution, but also that that capacity to implement that really varies throughout the region and also is met with varying levels of community support. So something to explore a bit further. Then we heard that back to the federal land that's available and how you might be able to trade that to get access to different types of land. And then we also heard the need for a new type of housing that we hadn't seen in the data as much, but around temporary workforce housing. So getting again at that construction supply of workers issue, and thinking how that temporary workforce investment could also be used in the long term to house other types of populations, maybe when those workers aren't occupying those units. So maybe that's a potential resource for the homeless as well, shelters, that kind of thing. So then when we get to the potential tools, already shadowed these a little bit, but the first was around infill development. And we heard a lot about how the challenge of getting that to be affordable was really around those land costs. And so thinking about ways to make the land more affordable, if that's through that transfer of development rights or through other mechanisms, so that those unique types of parcels can be used for different types of development that may be more affordable. And that would, again, capitalize on existing vacant or underutilized parcels, and generally pretty small parcels. Then when we look at accessory dwelling units, so those are, as you may know, are already additional living quarters on single-family lots that can be used to support different household types. And so I know they're often thought of as being used as like a source of income for owners who may want to rent out, and it's naturally more affordable because they're smaller, lower development costs. But those could also be used for seniors, whether it's so they can move there as kind of a granny flat situation, or if it's to house maybe a caregiver or something like that in their backyard. Then we also know that the kind of options that are available to support these two types of development are pretty similar. So that's, relaxing existing development codes, adopting design guidelines, helping build capacity of different homeowners to explore these new types of development, things like that. So then when we get to challenges with housing costs, and I think this has really resonated with a lot of people in the community when we've been talking about it. So this graph here shows those who are not just paying 30% of their income or more, that's the blue bar, but also those who are paying more than 50% of their income on housing costs, and that's that green bar up there. And so we've highlighted a few different populations that are particularly affected by this right now. Starting with seniors, but also veterans, single or unrelated adults, and that may harken back to that mismatch of housing types too. We also know homeowners are experiencing this, more so renters, but it's not isolated to just one or the other. And then you can see that compared to how that's playing out across all households in Washoe County right now. And we know that a lot of this is driven by some really high spikes in the housing market lately in terms of the rent and home value. Current rent, we've clocked in at over $1,600 for median rent, which is very high. And then also home value of more than $300,000. By some other estimates, it's even more. And we see that incomes have not been keeping up with that over the long range. So it's really putting a squeeze on these different residents. And so we know that there's some limitations on what the local governments can do, which is one reason why it's great that we have the state at the table in this conversation, given kind of the Dillon's rule dynamic and the ability to offer different types of tax relief, whether it's to homeowners or even to property owners that may be able to flow down to renters. So we want to think through that, given the capacity constraints on local governments. We also know that, the financing issue comes up in terms of resources to provide rental assistance or, maybe foreclosure assistance even on the homeownership side. Some limitations there, but we do know that the Reno Housing Authority has some strong assets around the voucher program that are a really big player in helping residents, although they're having trouble keeping up with market rents as they're getting so high, being able to get vouchers that landlords will accept, making sure the value is on par with the market. It's a little bit of a challenge right now. So some potential tools that have been discussed. The first is the Community Land Trust, and we know that this conversation is actively advancing with Reno City Council right now. But this would be a nonprofit, community-based organization that can offer affordable home ownership opportunities by retaining ownership of the land. Therefore, the property on top of it can be sold at a lower cost, and that preserves long-term affordability, not just for that first homeowner who purchases it, but there's resale restrictions placed on that so that that property remains affordable in the long term for the next buyer. Then we also know that employer-assisted housing is something that's of interest in the community, thinking through how to engage some of those larger businesses that are coming to the region to support long-term neighborhood investment through maybe a down payment assistance program. We've seen that across the country. Sometimes it'll be the local government offers one down payment assistance program, and then an employer can come in and match that in a neighborhood around where their job center is. So that's an exciting way to potentially engage the private sector in this effort as well. And then we also know that incorporating energy efficiency into affordable products can have a host of benefits for the property owner as well as for the tenant. And so property assessed clean energy financing is something that we've been talking about, or PACE, which offers low-cost, long-term financing for energy and water efficiency improvements to commercial, industrial, and multifamily properties. That requires local authorization, but once authorized, it's a great tool that developers can take advantage of to lower operating costs for property owners. And it reduces residents' utility costs, as well as reduces the amount of subsidy per unit required from local resources. So a lot of benefits there. Am I seeing a question?
Councilman Bybee.
I just wanted to stop you real quick on the Community Land Trust. How difficult are those to set up, and what, obviously that's something that's happened in other communities. I mean, how long does it take to set up, how difficult it is, and what kind of results have they seen in other communities by setting up a community land trust?
Sure. I think that's a great question, and one that we want to dig into further. We're going to be exploring some case studies on a few of these tools. I think Community Land Trust would definitely be one of them. The setup time is honestly one of the biggest barriers for Community Land Trust in many communities, and it really depends on the local capacity already. So if there's an existing nonprofit or agency that's willing to take this on, it's often a lot less costly to start up than if it's a new organization starting from scratch just to serve the purpose of being that community land trust. So my answer right now is it depends, and we're happy to dig into that further, but that is an important consideration given the cost, both in terms of acquiring the land, but also setting up that organizational infrastructure. And so we can be sure to provide some case studies that address some of that concern specifically. Any other? Great. Well, then there's more opportunity for a question later on, too, if you have any more. We're almost done. We have two more key findings that we'll get through today. This other one is around housing quality concerns. And so we know that the average housing unit in Washoe County is about 30 years old. Seeing the median year built is 1987. And that's pretty consistent across the three jurisdictions, Washoe, Reno, and Sparks. And so while that's, not as old as you may see throughout the country, 30 years is plenty of time for a house to need some significant maintenance. And that we know that from looking at the data on housing problems that all households are not able to keep up with that, and particularly once you get to those lower ends of the income spectrum, it's becoming a particular challenge. So when we talked with the working groups, and particularly got some good insight on how code enforcement is working, we heard that coordination across the departments has been really impactful for addressing those kind of life, health, and safety concerns. But really that's coming in at the step of condemning properties. So don't really have the capacity right now to get in much earlier on in the process before it gets to the condemnation stage. Then we also know that there's the opportunity to test that out with the motel ordinance in Reno that's being considered, and seeing whether or not getting in on that earlier side of the intervention may allow to address some of these housing quality concerns before the point where residents have to be displaced. Then we also know there's an opportunity for local governments to obtain tax delinquent properties for public use, and affordable housing could be one of those public uses. But we also know that there's some constraints around when that tax delinquent property is truly up for the local governments to auction versus how it can be called back for different property owners' purposes. So we also heard about some tools around the Blight Remediation Fund, and then some different administrative and legal penalties that are available to kind of have that hold those landlords accountable for the quality of their properties right now. And then in terms of those potential tools, thinking through strategic code enforcement, and so that's already on the table a little bit here, and thinking about how to proactively target inspections to certain areas, or in this case, certain target types of properties that are known to have quality issues, that may offer incentives or resources to support property owners. So not just coming in and laying on the penalties, but also saying, we know there are issues keeping up with this, and here's how you can address those with a little bit of extra support. And so that seeks to intervene earlier, so again, to avoid that tenant displacement issue. But on the other side of things, when that's not possible, important to think through how tenant protections can play a role in solving this issue and preventing displacement or supporting residents when they are displaced. So we've seen that that's across the board, just policies that ensure adequate living standards for renters. And so that can include a host of things like rental registries, relocation assistance for no-fault evictions, right of return policies when they are displaced or there's a new redevelopment that happened in their old property, and establishing standards for what a just cause eviction really is, to offer some tenants some legal recourse in situations so it's not the just cause. And then the last one, about expiring affordability and displacement concerns. I think we heard that come up a little bit with the conversation with the Home Consortium earlier. But there are quite a few tax credit properties in the region that are going to meet their 15-year mark when they have the option to opt out of their affordability contract within the next 5 years and within the next 10 years, really quite a few. So you see 32 out of the 54 tax credit properties in the region will meet that 15-year mark within the next 5 years. And while the region's done a great job of preserving those properties to date, we've heard that with the market taking off and a lot more opportunities to convert those properties to the market rate is becoming increasingly attractive to property owners, so that the need for preservation tools is going to become even more important over the next few years. And then we also know that when you think about the displacement side of things, there are those residents, which we mentioned earlier, already paying 50% or more of their income on housing costs. And when they're also low income, they're, we call them housing insecure, which makes them particularly vulnerable to housing displacement. So if their property is to exit the system, they'll likely have very limited ability to stay in that property if it's converted to market rate. So when we're thinking about that with the working groups, again, we heard that competition for 9% has helped ensure developers stick to longer affordability terms, particularly the 50-year mark. But that is a pretty limited resource, and that's only affecting about one property a year that can get through that 9% pool in the region. So thinking through what other kind of mechanisms might be available to support longer-term affordability restrictions for more properties. We already mentioned the increasing risk of conversion, and also then thinking about the capacity of nonprofit partners to step in when that 15-year mark is coming to purchase up that qualified contract and maintain the affordability is another mechanism that could be considered. And then when we're thinking about those tools, so here one thing that we've seen across the country is a preservation early warning system. And so that can not necessarily be tied to just tax credit properties, but any subsidized properties, or even depending on data availability, the just naturally occurring affordable housing stock in the market, keeping an inventory of those properties that may be at risk of converting to market rate and maybe losing their affordability for certain populations, so that the government or other nonprofit partners can intervene to really protect that affordability or offer protections to those residents. This can really help in targeting preservation efforts, since we know it's not possible to preserve all the affordable properties across the region all the time, as great as that would be. And so really thinking through how to leverage your limited resources today to specific properties where it can have the greatest impact. Then another way to help with that targeting may be a preservation overlay zone. So leveraging the zoning code to identify areas that maybe have traditionally offered a lot of affordable housing options, and you want to make sure you don't want to lose that asset. So targeting that with an overlay that then requires, any redevelopment to include maybe one-for-one replacement of affordable units in that specific area. It could also just require right of first refusal, which is the next tool we have up here, which authorizes qualified organizations to purchase a subsidized rental property if the owner decides to sell before it is sold at market, to help preserve that long-term affordability. And then those qualified organizations could include nonprofits, government agencies, or the development's tenant association. So things to think through what partners might make the most sense there. So now, I'll stop there, since that was a ton of information about potential tools, and I think it would be great to hear if you have questions that we can address on our next visit through deeper case studies or things like that. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to Chris to talk about our next steps.
Any questions at this point? Okay, seeing none.
Awesome. Thank you.
So just to preview kind of where we are and what's coming up, we have a quick turnaround for our next trip back here in May, where we're really going to be digging into a lot of the tools and high-level strategies that we've kind of articulated somewhat today, and getting more about how those tools or potential strategies could be feasible and specifically in the Truckee Meadows region. And so we're really excited about our May visit coming up. We recognize there's not a regional planning governing board presentation at that time, but when we come back in June, I think this is important because we'll be able to present to the Regional Planning Governing Board those community profiles as a deliverable for Phase 1, as well as some of the potential tools that have been kind of discussed and kind of finalized in terms of their priority for the near term or the short term action for implementation of the full plan. And so really excited about both May and June, because I think it's going to really culminate in a good effort towards summarizing not only the conditions that we summarized today, but as well as some of the strategies and tools that we'll be prioritizing in the short term for presentation to the governing board, as well as for council action in the future. And so ending there, I did want to bring Sharon back up to talk about some of the good news that we had on our trip in terms of some of the outreach and support that we received from various stakeholders.
Thank you. You all probably recall when we were in front of you in June, one of your council members asked, how will this be paid for? And we said, somebody else's money, and indeed it has been. We were able to fundraise all of the money for this Phase 1 through community giving, and we are very close to having Phase 2 funded. We did an event last night for potential fundraisers, and we have about $35,000 left to secure for Phase 2, and last night we secured $15,000 at a fundraising event that we held. And the distinction there that I'm really happy to share with you is the funding thus far has primarily been from the financial institutions, but last night it was 2 local developers who are learning about what we're doing, and they've seen the progress that we've made and where we're approaching, and they came on board and put money toward it as well. So we are very close to having Phase 2 funded, and in that June timeframe, we know we will, and then we'll start marching down the path to secure funding for Phase 3. I know that some of our team members have talked to individual council members for their discretionary funding, and that will continue, I'm quite certain. But I think, again, it's a very positive message that now the developers are coming on board as well. They recognize the need, and they're going to share in the responsibility. Thank you.
And just to highlight, we are posting a community survey that's currently available now. It's been up for about a week or so. And so we really want to distribute this more broadly and make sure that this gets out to the community. We're looking to get a couple thousand responses to really give us some good feedback from residents in the Truckee Meadows regions about the current living situation, their future housing preferences, as well as their understanding of the connection between housing needs and preferences and access to these various resources. And so we can begin to assess some of the access to opportunity conversation we presented on last time. So that's available at tmaffordablehousing.metrorequest.com. And if you need more information, we are continuously posting information to the tmaffordablehousing.org site about not only this process, but some of the data and tools that we'll be doing case studies on as well. So I'll pause for any additional questions that you might have.
Okay, any final questions? Councilmember Bybee.
I just had a question. I don't know if it's for you or maybe for staff. Is that survey being promoted on social media so that we get a lot of input? I know I've seen some of the Twitter and other things. Are we promoting that so that we get the input that we need?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, very good. I have 2 questions.
Yes,
These may also be for staff more than for you. The first is, are we connecting at all with the interim study on housing affordability? I know that their next meeting is May 15th, and I don't know if that syncs up at all, if you're planning at all to offer to provide a presentation. You know, you referenced the Dillon rule earlier, and so that's sort of the elephant in the room, is that some of these strategies are going to require a conversation with the legislature, and this interim committee would be the perfect opportunity to start that conversation. So I don't know if you want to give an update on any communications that have happened there.
Yeah, I don't think we've had any communications specifically thus far, but we are looking to connect with that in the future. Yeah.
Senator Julia Ratty is on the.
Yes, sorry, yes. Senator Ratty is on our executive leadership team, and so we're briefing her on throughout this
I
process,
assumed
yeah.
there was a connection there. I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure we were maximizing that in the spirit of getting the most bang for our buck in our investment here.
as you heard, Senator Ratty is serving on our executive leadership team, and the LCB is serving on
Okay, perfect.
our community leadership team.
Good, so that connection is there. And the other question, this may be more for staff, and this may be better answered in the regional plan update agenda item is, I think I stated at the outset, my support for this effort, a lot of it is based on this is a valuable input into the regional plan update. And so, you look at some of the policies that are being contemplated in this work, inclusionary zoning being a big one. Just want to hear that this is going to be an input and it's going to sync up timing-wise for the update so that we're making sure that all of the policy discussion that's happening here is going to roll into the plan update. So maybe if you just want to address that briefly for us.
Hi, Jeremy Smith with Regional Planning. Absolutely, that has been the intent all along, was why we wanted to be involved in this project with TMHC and Enterprise was to do just that. We know we need to boost sort of those policies as they're presented today in the regional plan, and so this will feed right in. As far as timing concerns, I mean, we're certainly working to try to align the finishing of the different phases with where we are on the regional plan update. There's always room to amend as well if the time doesn't work out, but the goal is definitely to get these good ideas built into that policy work, absolutely.
Okay, I mean, particularly because a lot of them are going to be ideas that once baked into the regional plan, then the individual jurisdictions are going to have to respond to. So, I mean, yes,
Absolutely.
I get a little nervous when I hear, we can always amend later. I mean,
Well,
sure. Just that given, and I don't mean to get on you, but I mean, just given obviously the importance and the haste in which we're all concerned about this issue, if we can get those into the plan update and have that be a featured part of the plan update, then we have a higher, hopefully, success rate with propagation out to the jurisdictions.
100% agree, and I think that the funding work, the work you guys have been doing to bring the money to bear and get this affordable housing, project moving quickly will probably allow that to happen. And then you'll also hear in the upcoming presentation that we've extended the regional plan update timeline a little bit, and we'll show you a schematic of that.
Okay, very good. Any further questions? If none, okay, thanks for joining us again. I hope your travels home are safe, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Item C, presentation, consideration, and possible direction to staff regarding draft results, data gathering, and assessment of regional stormwater GIS data.
Chair Bobzien, we have one public comment.
Oh, okay.
Kathy Brandhorst.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Brandhorst, and I am the United States President. I just wanted to let you know, I feel that I have been discriminated against. I am a single person. I don't live on C Street. I moved to Sky Mountain, and they put over 1 million bullets in my body in order to steal my house. So I didn't know that I was taken back to C Street, and I had already moved out of C Street. So what happened was, I don't live there. It belongs to 2 other children that are sitting outside their apartment. They're playing out there. They live in that apartment that I live in. And those 2 children have been beaten, slapped, punched in the face. I looked at their faces. They're black and blue. Also, I just wanted to tell you, those children never had a chance because they were thrown in the apartment, number 3, with adults. Because I'm living in their home. And this is really crucial for somebody, you know, like those two children, they live there, they decorated. I saw a few of their furniture still inside my home, but somebody's keeping it invisible to block it off, that they live there. And so what is happening every day, the neighborhood would tell me, Kathy, you don't live there, get out. I do pay my rent at $660 a month to live there. But I know I don't live there, so every day I go down to, not every day, but it feels like it, I go down to Sky Mountain. I sit there for a few minutes, hoping somebody would help me get inside. All I need is some keys to get inside. But I heard my neighbor had the keys. I heard, you know, several, like Don Costa have the keys, and other people have the keys, and I don't get the keys.
Okay, thank you. We will move now to item C, 6C.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Executive Director Pro Tem. Thank you for sitting in. I'm Jeremy Smith, the GIS Coordinator with Regional Planning, and here today to talk to you about draft results, basically the results of the Phase 1 data gathering and assessment of regional stormwater GIS data. I know some of you folks that sit on some other boards and commissions may have seen this, and so I apologize for being repetitive, but I'll try to be pretty brief. So the initial objectives, there was a request from the Western Regional Water Commission to take a look at some of the state of affairs with stormwater GIS data in the region and understand where we had gaps and what it might take to fill those gaps in. There's, I think, a long-term vision of being able to model and maybe even the flow of a raindrop through the system to where it ultimately ends up. And we found that, you know, that's probably a ways off, but we're on the right path. It's important, I've been told many times, to point out that, you know, stormwater data and this idea of flooding, these are really sort of two separate things. I'm not talking about flooding per se, but we are just talking about the GIS features that we have tracked that show us where we have implemented stormwater infrastructure pieces on the landscape. And of course, just because they're not showing up in this GIS data doesn't mean that they're actually there on the ground. And that's the thing we're kind of trying to solve at this point. We were approved for the Phase 1 of the initial contemplation of this, which was this data gathering and assessment. So we went ahead and went forward with that, thanks to funding from the Western Regional Water Commission. So the study area really looked at 9 hydro basins that intersect the developed areas of our region. We thought hydro basins was an appropriate unit to look at geographically because this is really how water moves through the system topographically. So there's the TMSA is contained within that, as is Washoe Valley and the adjacent northern valleys, which don't feed into the Truckee River system. So the analysis approach, it was kind of a, there's a blank slate, sort of what should we do, to try to find out if we do have good coverage with GIS data. And so we decided to develop a grid of where we have development, looking at things like dwelling units and business locations, the lengths of roads from the Washoe County roads data, building square footage from the assessor, that sort of stuff. And we basically cut the region up into these quarter-mile grid squares and then evaluated where those pieces were. And we were able to understand, what areas of the region are developed. And then we kind of relied on this assumption that areas that are developed are the areas that we're going to need stormwater infrastructure to be in existence, right? If we haven't done anything, if it's on a hillside, we're not going to probably build a tremendous amount of stormwater infrastructure. So really the key assumption was where we've developed, that's where we wanted to focus our efforts on this initial pass. And so the first way we did that was we just got that data together, brought it into the GIS, turned the layers on, and we got an intern from UNR Geography, Tyler Smith, did a really great job. And just, he looked at every single grid square with the imagery on, with the road features on, with the housing units, and then looked at where we had stormwater, things like manholes and drop inlets, and where there were stormwater pipes and culverts and this kind of a thing, and did a visual assessment. And here's the results of that. I mean, I think he did it probably 2 or 3 times because he's refining and calibrating as he went. But there's 3 categories that he came up with, and those were that, hey, number one, it has stormwater data in this quarter-mile square, and it seems sufficient given what he was seeing, in the data underlying. Number 2 was there's stormwater data here, and that's the yellow square you see, but it doesn't necessarily seem sufficient compared to, his calibration. Maybe we need more there. And then the gray, number 3, is that there was no stormwater data, but these other features were present. And so that kind of raised a bit of a red flag for us as a data gap, basically. But we didn't want to stop at just a visual assessment. We want to take full advantage of the power of the GIS and its technical capacity. So we also implemented a quantitative assessment. And so what I have here is basically just a very simplified example of how we went about that, kind of just thinking through it. We looked at ratios of development features that we knew that we had mapped correctly, right, in a complete fashion, compared to the stormwater features in each grid square. And so in my simple example here, you could imagine one of those quarter-mile squares having 47 housing units, and there's 5 point features. I said manholes, but it could be point features. And then imagine a quarter-mile square could easily have 470 units in it, a bunch of apartments or something, and houses, and it still only has the 5 points. And this is the way we got at, does that seem complete, right? Shouldn't we have more stormwater features commensurate to the amount of development we have? And so we didn't stop at, housing units and manholes. We actually looked at 6 different relationships of development to the stormwater features. We had stormwater line features, and we had stormwater point features, right? And we compared those and created ratios for their, existence in each grid square to building square footage, the occurrence of roads, and the length of those roads, and then also the sum of housing units and business points together. And so though we took all 6 of those comparisons, ratios, and standardized them, and I apologize for the font change, basically looking at an index, right, of where you had the lowest values, you had the most complete stormwater data, and where the values got very high, you had many development features and not commensurate level of stormwater feature. And if you look at this map, the blue areas are A-OK, it's according to our assessment, right? And as you go towards the yellow and oranges and reds, that's where things become more severe with regard to there should be stormwater features in this region. And those are the target areas, right? This is a map basically now of how we can prioritize going out into the field and capturing these data to build that complete stormwater network. And you might say, but Jeremy, there were areas that had all of those black spots are actually areas, squares, that have no stormwater data currently in them as far as GIS. So we created a model to sort of fill those in to get back to this. So we would have every square prioritized, basically, along this continuum. So this, in the end, when we averaged all of the scores we created, the ratios being standardized together, these were the averages by hydro basin. And so if you just look the very darkest colors up there in Spanish Springs, 1.03, that low number is indicating that compared to the amount of development that's out in Spanish Springs, we seem to have the commensurate amount of stormwater data tracked in our GIS. And it goes down from there. And you can see that kind of the areas that probably need the most work are Cold Springs and the Truckee Meadows proper, the large 87 hydro basin there. So that's the order. These values are actually slated to be updated because, as I might have anticipated, as we started to put this information out there to staff that first initially fed us the information, they recognized that, they hadn't given us everything that they knew they had. That somebody saw it and said, wait a minute, we've got stuff there. And so that stuff's been coming in, and as we get, I think that all of that together, we'll be able to recalculate, and it will hopefully look even a little better. We didn't just look at stormwater lines and points. We also looked at the attribute fields, right? GIS data comes with, an Excel spreadsheet for every set of features, basically, that talks about different attributes. We looked at the retention basins or other polygon features. We didn't think it was appropriate to, try to see if there was polygon features for retention ponds everywhere in the region that there was development, but we did put that together in a centralized place. Obviously, if you want to model water moving through a system, the system needs to be connected to allow that to happen. So we evaluated to some degree how connected the features were, like line features. There was disconnects, say, at like jurisdictional boundaries sometimes because they're managed independently. And then, of course, there was hydrographic features, streams, basically, and terrain, and then irrigation ditches that were put in back in the 1800s. And those serve a purpose as well with regard to moving stormwater. And that was identified to us as an area where folks from the staff level would like to see more investigation into how that's playing in. So we're gonna work on that, hopefully. Let's skip that one. So conclusions, I think we're actually pretty far along towards kind of a schematic view of stormwater features in our region. I said 60% previously, but it's actually higher. Once I incorporate that new data I received, we'll know that it's probably closer to 70% of our developed areas appear to have a sufficient or adequate GIS data. 20% of these areas that, aren't in the 60% have some data, but doesn't seem to be complete. And then there's about 20% of the squares that, don't have any data right now. But like I say, those numbers will change slightly. And we looked at the order, and really, Truckee Meadows proper and Cold Springs, if I was going to pick where to start, I would start there. So sharing the results, these results, these data are not just necessarily out there on the internet, but we've put them on the internet, but they're password protected for the staff working on this so that they can get in there and give me the kind of feedback that I'm trying to get to see if we're actually complete. I've put up this presentation as well, and working on a final report to take into account all of these phase 1 findings and also a phase 2. So one of the directions we got from the WRWC was to go ahead and work with staff to think about, okay, what's it going to take now to fill in the gaps? And so we're going to have to sit down, and we've done some of that already, and come up with exactly what that will be. And there is some funding available to see that move forward. So hopefully we'll be a small part of that. If anything that we did learn about our ability to help with this is that, we're not field people. We don't have all of the equipment or time to get out there in the field. As much as I wanted to at the beginning of this, get out there and start walking down, ditches, it's just not, I think, what's going to happen for us. So we really need to rely on the jurisdictional staff in Public Works to help us to complete this and probably play some sort of an administrative role to help it. So we've got some new data coming in. We're getting some more data from NDOT that'll help the scores. Basically went through all of that. This is kind of interesting, though. We are collaborating with some other entities that are also working on stormwater. So I'm sitting on the stormwater committee for the One Truckee River group that's meeting basically quarterly to talk about actions along the river, right? And that's been a fun thing. There's a regional watershed management plan. This is really getting at the area we didn't look at on the hillsides and how water contributes to the topography. So we're working with City of Reno and Stantec staff to integrate the results of both of those. And then we also have Tyler, who was our intern for the stormwater project, working on a source water protection program project with RCI and NDEP. And that's really been coming along nicely. He's been created this really neat online viewer looking at source water protection areas. And so, in fact, the laptop and and his, some of his skills that are being leveraged from the stormwater thing directly into the RCI program. So it's really been a good opportunity. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about that project.
Okay, questions from Jeremy?
Very interesting.
Councilman McKenzie?
So your studies are completely about features. It doesn't have anything to do with the capacities of those features.
That's correct.
Right.
And we did try to examine the attribute level, which features, because we got several pieces of data. Some do have capacity, and so we would highlight that this seems to be an important factor. If we were to go back, say, to this matrix that I didn't talk about, these were all different point features that we got from City of Reno, Sparks, Washoe County. We also got line features. Some have diameters, so that would speak to capacity, but no, we didn't specifically look at sort of modeling that.
And your modeling map there that shows where we've got the information and the highest
that's correct.
Amount of information doesn't show particularly necessarily show that we've got a lot of information about what our stormwater capacities are in those areas. It's just that we have features available in those areas.
Correct. Yes, but it is the first step towards getting
Right.
to having that ability.
So, what do you know about the Stantec study, and how did that help you with your study?
It hasn't actually helped me necessarily with the study, but I know that it's sort of evaluating the areas that are outside what we looked at specifically. So my hope is that as they complete that work, we'll be able to merge, what's coming off the hill slopes with what we've identified in the developed areas.
And that study's mostly outside of the developed area.
That's my understanding.
It's not
Yes.
in the developed areas. That was the
Yeah,
what I
so
was trying
hopefully
to
those two we'll be able to work together to paint the full picture.
Right.
Yeah.
And the goal that Western Regional Water was talking about, and Von Hartung, I wish he was here, was the guy that's got the dream, is he wants to be able to go up on the hillside and drop a teaspoon of water and find out where it's going to go. And so that's kind of what the chase is here.
That's the chase, exactly.
While I believe that we need to know a lot of information about where our stormwater's going, my goal would be to figure out what it's doing once it gets there. And because, I mean, we've got two people in the audience here today that we see quite frequently that are being affected because we didn't have this knowledge and haven't been utilizing this knowledge in the past. And that's why I was supportive of moving forward with this project. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, any additional? Okay, seeing none. Thanks,
Great,
Jeremy.
thank you.
Okay, next item, 6D, presentation, consideration, and possible, oh, I'm sorry, do we have public comment? No, we do not. No. Okay, so presentation, consideration, and possible direction to staff regarding the 2017 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. For the record, Nate Kusha, Regional Planning. We're going to go ahead and give an update on where we're at in the update process. So just a brief overview of what we'll be going over. We're going to have a brief recap of our second MetroQuest survey. We'll take a look at the updated timeline for the update process. We'll go over where we're currently at in that process, and we'll wrap up with some next steps. So a quick recap of our second MetroQuest survey. Our second regional plan update survey is currently out. We partnered with Truckee Meadows Tomorrow and the folks over there, including Jeremy, for this survey, and really asked about quality of life in the Truckee Meadows. We launched the survey on January 29th. We've currently had about 581 participants take it. Hopefully all of you have taken it. If not, we encourage you to go ahead and do so by the end of the month, as we will be closing it on May 1st, and we'll begin to analyze the data at that time. So we'll go talk about the updated regional plan update timeline. So overhead, you can see our updated project schedule. Hopefully you can see it a little better in your presentation slides there, as it's kind of small. The project schedule includes 6 tasks. This was developed with our consultant team as well as the regional plan update working group. We'll go ahead and briefly touch on what each of these tasks are. So task 1 is the stakeholder engagement, which will be occurring throughout the entirety of the update project. Task 2 is our baseline assessment, which we're currently working on, and we'll talk about a little bit later. Task 3 is the development of variations or scenarios based on the baseline assessment. Task 4, which we're also currently working on, is our policy evaluation and development. Task 5 is the drafting of the updated regional plan. And task 6 is the final products and final adoption, which we are now expecting to be spring of 2019. Previously, it was expected to be fall of 2018, so it's a small shift. This shift reflects the concerns we heard from jurisdictional staff, our consultant team, as well as our own concerns about the kind of aggressive, shorter timeframes we were previously predicting. Now we'll go over where we're at in the update process. So right now, we are currently working on task 4 and task 2 of our project schedule, which are the policy evaluation and baseline assessment map. So for the policy evaluation, or task 4 of our project schedule, Team RPA staff work with the regional plan update working group to identify redundancy of policies in the regional plan, and also has completed a comprehensive run-through of every policy currently in the plan. For each policy, we drafted a brief description of the policy. We looked at what the policy is trying to do, how often the policy is used, what is working as well as what is not working about the policy, and finally, how can the policy be changed? Can it be collapsed into another policy, or is it easily disposable? This provided staff with a deeper understanding of what policies need the most attention, as well as provided a path forward towards reducing redundancy in the plan and the overall number of policies. We then passed this evaluation along to our consultant team at Echo Northwest, who are currently reviewing it and will provide a deeper analysis. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Jeremy to talk about our baseline assessment map, or task 2 of our project schedule.
Thank you. Hi, Jeremy Smith again, Regional Planning. So this is really, really exciting, actually, and it seems to me kind of like a culmination or a really nice step towards putting together all of the work we've been doing with GIS since I've been working, and even before, at the Regional Planning Agency. And it's really creating something we're calling a baseline assessment map. And This is just a picture of sort of what it looks like when you get there. It's the TMSA and a backdrop, but it's taken all of that regional data warehouse information that we've been putting together over the years and brought it into one place to visualize together for folks. And if you can't read the small print, I put this here. These are the categories that we currently have in there. Land use, that includes stuff like the assessor parcel data, where the TODs are, things like that. And this kind of data we've been tracking for a long time. Future land use, that's our Team RPA parcel fabric, where we've looked at all the tentative maps, the PUDs, we've modeled future potential units, all baked in there. Water and sewer, we've done a lot of work with public works staff looking at water demand projections based on population growth, wastewater generation, given different scenarios, right, of how we build the future, which treatment facilities might be impacted. So those kinds of calculations are there. Same with schools, transportation, we've done probably the most work with to support the TransCAD transportation demand model. We have quite a bit of information on employment from some of the third-party info group data that we've done and some of the employment projections, and then finally constraints. The one topic that we contemplate in the update as one of the categories that we don't have here yet is public safety data. And so we're trying to gather that. We've never really, that's kind of been the last hurrah. So we're going to try and get as much of that data together as we can and also add that in. And so this map is available to obviously Team RPA staff and then the Regional Plan Working Group staff. So that's planning staff from Reno Sparks, Washoe County, the RTC, Jim Smitherman from the Western Regional Water Commission will be joining us. That level of Washoe County School District is in the room as well. And they have access to this, and so they can actually go through and start looking at data. And so this is just some stuff I picked randomly to turn on. It doesn't matter what it's showing necessarily at this moment, but it is the traffic analysis zone data. It's the household population in 2015 is what the graduated symbol is showing, and then there's bus stops in there, and I may have turned some other stuff on too. But what's really cool about this map is that the user has the capacity to change the symbology. Right, this is a new thing that hasn't really been that available with the GIS online map viewing products very easily, and so now it's actually very easy. And so this could be in the hands of someone at the City of Reno, maybe like a Sienna Reed who might be looking at this, and she could change the colors, print a map, and create a story from the data that we've been putting together and really kind of starting to make this function more like a regional data warehouse that can be used. And of course the reason to do that would be to bring that information to bear on the policy debate around where we think we should grow, how we want to design and evaluate the scenarios we're going to come up with, and the policy review that Nate was speaking to. How can we use this information that we've collected, right, and start feeding it into the policies we're creating for the plan? And of course, you can zoom in, right, click on stuff, get attributes, that kind of thing. We've been showing stuff like this. This happens to be down in Denali Ranch, and it's showing a tentative map that's active and how many units are approved and how many are remaining to be built. That's the kind of information that's in here that, we're not stopping with just the visualization of the data, but what I've found is that the first thing to do, really, before you start doing statistics, right, is to just get everything together and look at it, right? Just start looking through it and making sure that it's making sense. And then, of course, we're also going to try and quantify this and basically take these categories and create indices for each category where you combine things like, we have a lot of transportation data. Let's say it's the TAZ volumes on roads predicted in the future, plus the location of bus stops, what's the level of service, this kind of stuff. We can put that together to create like a transportation index, right? And if we do that for all the categories, then we can start looking at these indices together and hopefully paint a map of the region that will help guide us as we look at where does it make sense to develop next. And so, that's kind of our goal, right, at regional planning, is to get that forward-thinking look, the 30,000-foot view of what's going to be best for our region. I wrote a small sort of internal memo, but I was just going to read to you some parts that I wrote so you could kind of get where my head was at on it. The baseline assessment was initially contemplated as a way to build consensus with the Regional Plan Update Staff Working Group around what areas within our region are most appropriate to be developed in the short term. The term appropriate is pretty vague, right, and all-encompassing, but includes aspects such as where do we have existing infrastructure capacity to support growth? How much growth can be supported before we trigger a capacity limitation, so like school overcrowding or traffic? Where are existing entitlements and how far along are they in the development pipeline? In what part of our region would growth negatively encroach on natural resources or open space? How will growth affect the levels of service for necessary municipal services such as public safety? How will the location of growth affect how goods, services, and people move into, out of, and around the region? And then considering the answers to the questions above, which areas of potential growth cost the least to implement? So I tried to boil it down, last statement I'll read here. In other words, where in our region does it make sense to grow next if we're thinking in terms of maximizing the efficiency of our available infrastructure, minimizing associated costs, and playing to the strengths of our existing and desired land use pattern? So we're hoping that this tool, this baseline assessment map, will help us get at least closer to that. I'm happy to answer any questions before I turn it back over to Nate to wrap up.
Any questions at this point? Councilmember Carr.
Yes, just real quick, does this also, like, if I go on here, it show what it's our currently zoned for and all of that kind of
Correct,
things?
absolutely. Yeah.
It has that. And then, so, if we want to direct people to a particular area, this is just open to anybody. We can use this, we can...
This right now is not open to anyone because it does contain some proprietary features. Right now, it's password protected, and it's only been shared with the regional plan working group. But I think we can discuss, how we want to roll this out, and maybe there's a version that we can slice a few things off that are sensitive or something, and we can. But as far as the data that Shak talks about zoning and how many units are modeled, that's absolutely available to you right now.
Because we talked about the idea, and obviously I'm not normally on this board, so I'll just say, throw this out there. One of the ideas that we talked about is the idea of being able to allow developers and people who come in town to really get excited about some vacant lands that are there.
Sure.
Something that EDON can use, some of our local areas. And so this is an awesome tool if we could make it user-friendly. I think there's probably obviously a lot more information than they need.
Exactly.
But that piece of it would be something I think we could use in any kind of advertising for people who are looking at moving this way. They can look at their zoning, they can look at all the things you just talked about. So what a great tool, but I think it's
Thank you.
fascinating.
We'll definitely pursue getting there as well.
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions, Councilmember Breckus.
So, Dr. Smith, do you have the jurisdictional boundaries in the annexation program of annexations on that data set?
We have specifically not put, I think, the jurisdictional boundaries in this. We're trying to take a jurisdictionless approach at this time, but I think you'll be excited to hear that we have another intern. We won a PAC internship from the University of Nevada Geography Department again, and she is working on telling the story of the annexations and the changes to Sphere over time back through all the plans. We're creating all those features in the GIS, so we're going to be able to actually track, to the best that we can reconstruct it, that story.
Yeah, I
So
think
we're
that's
working on
going to
it.
be important because, we are a multi-jurisdictional boundary. So the jurisdictional lines are probably one of the most core principles of geography that I think, your agency is involved in, responsible for the output of the plan product. So I think that's going to be important. Why did we do 2 surveys? 2 MetroQuest surveys?
In fact, we've done, I think there are 3 now that are live, and we're working on 2 more, and there are 2 coming from Washoe County. We're basically trying to leverage the tool, this license for a year. We can do an unlimited number of surveys. And so the first one for the regional plan update specifically was about challenges.
Yeah.
And the second one was more about, it was a happy survey. It's like, what is it about the region that is making the quality of life high? So we took that tack, and now I think if we have the time and we get there, which I think we will target the next regional plan update MetroQuest survey around specific policy concerns that come up in the discussions as we review the policies and look to change them. Like, the affordable housing one, for instance, is absolutely going to be critical to the integration of that affordable housing policy that comes from the enterprise strategy into the regional plan.
Well, here's some input that I have, and I think sometimes you don't necessarily want the tool, just because we have it to drive it. And
course.
I think, we're being told here that the timeframe's slipping. We've slipped beyond our statutory obligation. I think that I would encourage less of that and more getting into the meat of it right now. the expertise that you or the consultants bring in, rather than more broad brush kind of input. I think we're at the point with the input where we need to have product suggestions, policy, ways we're going, and then respond to that. I think that you're a small staff. I think you've already been kind of moved into other things that aren't necessarily moving to the regional plan adoption. The housing study, it seems great, but I even question some of that, which is so high level, whereas I see Reno's need to, jump in and get the ADU ordinance on and deal with a problematic parking reduction provision in code, rather than have someone come from out of the region and tell us we should do discounts for parking in our zoning code, because we've had that in for 10 years and it's not working well. We need to move to implementation. So I'm just afraid of other distractions, and I think continuous surveying is more distractions. And I think that, so that's just my input. I'm very interested in this policy evaluations that you all did. I'd like to see it. I'd like for the board to see it. And I'd like to see whatever product Eco Northwest is delivering to you. I think that, and I'm going to share this with my colleagues here, I've been saying, and I was probably coming off as a crank about 4 or 5 years ago, focus on the regional plan, focus on the regional plan. But that was a long time ago. And I think if we had been more saying, let's get the regional plan done. Some of the regional strife that we're having, not only among the jurisdictions, but out with distinctive neighborhood identities that are forming around, some of the regional pressures they think could have been alleviated. So I think we're at the point as a body where you're doing products, you're drafting things, you're sending paper back and forth with the planning directors or whoever, that I think they need to come to us so we can formulate the direction that I think we haven't been strong enough to you all to get. And I know Ms. Robinson isn't here, but that's my very affirmative challenge to everyone, because I think we have fallen down on the job. So,
Well,
thank you
I share
for sharing that.
Of course,
hearing that.
we share your concern, and in fact, I did speak with Director Robinson this morning about exactly this issue, and we're going to bring the consultants. They're coming at the end of this month, and we want to show some significant progress to you all on what we have done with the policy side of things, and get that in front of you. So that's absolutely where our heads are as well. And we do try to do a lot of different things, and so point taken. But we're definitely committed to bringing that to bear, and we're on the same track.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Okay, seeing none, I would look for a motion, or yes, I would accept a motion.
Nate has a
to
few
accept.
more slides
We do have
to
more?
finish up.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry about that.
wrap up, no
Sorry, we
worries.
were on the,
Just
we
to
were on
give
the
you
cool
an
stuff.
idea of where we're heading,
Yep.
Our next tasks are task 3 and task 4. So task 3 is really this development of these scenarios, these kind of future ways we can grow, which a lot of that's going to be based on the baseline assessment map and what comes out of that. And task 4, which we've already done the first half of, which is this policy evaluation we've talked of, and we'll definitely bring that back to you guys. The second part of that is policy development, which is a lot of what we're going to be working on from here on out with the working group as well as our consultant team at Echo Northwest. Once we get this evaluation back, we'll look at, okay, how do we turn these into a coherent and maybe hopefully much shorter list of policies that are really implementable and can be really effective for the region. And with that, there's a motion overhead, unless you have any questions for us.
okay. No final questions, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Burke-Biegler.
I move to accept this report regarding the 2017 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan update.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second? We have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thanks so much. And let's go now to item 6F, discussion and possible action on the annual performance evaluation for the Executive Director of Regional Planning. Mr. Executive Pro Tem, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we all know, the real executive director is not here today due to an unforeseen illness. And under both state law and the contract you have with her, she does have a legal right to be present at her own evaluation. So on page 39, you have a staff report, and at the bottom of that staff report, you have 4 potential actions that you may take. The first one being that you've done what you did in the past, which is there's an attachment, which is an evaluation report, or an evaluation form, excuse me, that would be sent to you electronically, that will be returned to my office, and then we will condense that for you to evaluate the director at your next regularly scheduled meeting. That's been what you did in the past 2 or 3 years. Continuing down, you cannot discuss the evaluation with the director as she's not here. You could continue it to a later date, and that's pretty much your options at this time.
Okay, any discussion from the members?
I think we should continue it until she can be here. That seems the fair assessment, although, I mean, getting something online so that we could do the evaluation online would be fine if that's already drafted, but I hate to have us looking at something that she hasn't had the full chance to review.
I believe the attachment one that we have is just the form that we've used in
Yeah, the form that
past.
we've used in the
So, I mean,
past.
just in terms of, not dinging her for
Yeah.
being sick today, and I'm
Yeah,
glad
poor
that she's
baby.
not getting me sick or anybody else sick. One possibility would be, and that would be fine if we want to do that, but one possibility would be just continuing with what we've always done. Direct staff to get the forms to all of us, and then we
Right.
come back at the June meeting and
Yeah,
do it.
we can do
But,
that. I think that's fine.
Councilmember McKenzie.
I know in the past, we've done the form and sent them in, and then the chairman has got together with her to talk about the evaluations, and then at the next meeting, we've done an overall discussion. But that gives her an opportunity to look at those evaluations and discuss them with the representative from the board before we have the open meeting. And I think that has worked good in the past, which is the second selection on the ways to do it on this bullet.
Councilmember Bybee.
I would agree. I think that's worked well in the past, and I'd like to get the evaluations out to us now so that we have the opportunity to complete them. And then, since we don't meet till June, I don't want to move the whole item because then it takes us 4 months down the line. So I'd like to do the evaluations as it worked well in the past, that we have the opportunity, and whether she meets with you beforehand, but we would take action at the meeting in June. So that would be my preference. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on this, or are we moving towards a motion?
And I will make that as a motion.
Second.
If that's in the correct word. Am I good on the wording, Mr. Esposito?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, 7, reports. Members and directors' reports. Do we have anything? If not, our next meeting is June 14th, 2018. Legal counsel's report, 7B.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing on the legal side to address. I would like to ask Jeremy Smith to come back up. I think there was discussion of having a meeting before the June 14th date to address the budget item we pulled at the beginning of the meeting. And
Absolutely,
he did
yeah.
that. He coordinated that, so I'll defer to him.
Thank you, Jeremy Smith, for the record, Regional Planning. So I sent you guys an email about item 6E coming off today, and then we went ahead and reserved City of Reno council chambers for 2 weeks from this time, but knowing that that might not work for everyone, and we probably will need to coordinate our schedules to make sure we can all be there for that, that budget item. So what we would plan to do is just probably first thing in the morning, start, an email, some sort of doodle poll or something, and make sure we get all of you, get your availability so that you can respond, and we can get that special meeting scheduled to get the budget item taken care of.
Yeah, I guess I would just flag for myself, I have something from 3 o'clock on that day, but could do something if it were earlier.
A little earlier in the day.
But that would be just me. I don't know if anyone else wants to give any calendaring input at this point.
Wait, so April 26th, is that the
April 26th, Thursday, April 26th, we have one out of town.
So is this to adopt the budget? Is this or is this to discuss the item that was pulled?
This is the continuance of the item.
Exactly.
When do we have to adopt the budget by?
I believe that is the adopting of the budget, because that will need to go to the cities to make sure it's inside their budgets before submission at the end of May.
Yeah, but don't we have a legal obligation to adopt the budget as a political subdivision and send that down to, yep, by like May 23rd?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
The way the budgeting has worked here historically, these deadlines that Jeremy referred to, is to allow each of the local governments to participate, and then the deadline for reporting it to the LCB, I believe it is, for the budgets, is later in time. So what he's trying to do is, or what the staff was trying to do, is get the budget done at some point prior to that May deadline, so that it can be complied for all 3 jurisdictions, because the City of Reno, City of Sparks, and Washoe County's budget is tied to the
Right.
approval of this budget.
Right, so likely it's the same due date to LCB as all other political subdivisions, but in order to bake it into the jurisdictional budgets,
Exactly.
we're doing this.
But,
Okay.
but if this body is meeting, in April 26th, then not again till June 24th, don't we have to meet to adopt our budget and send it down by that end of May deadline?
Yeah.
So are we going to have 2 meetings then, one in April and one in May?
As yet to be determined, I would assume.
We'd have to have 2.
The hope would be if we, if progress is made in the coming weeks, we could do it all in one meeting, but if
Oh,
not.
on April 26th.
If not,
Okay,
we'll
that's
have
what we're
to
thinking.
move
Okay.
forward. Okay, we now have 2 unavailables on April 26th.
April
Councilwoman Bybee.
26th.
Yeah, April 26th.
Just as a point of reference for the city of Sparks, we are looking at our final budget approval for the city of Sparks city budget on our April 23rd meeting for the
Okay.
Sparks City Council.
Okay. Well,
I will definitely check into this. I'm not 100% positive, but I'm pretty sure that this item would approve the budget for this body.
Be the budget
Yeah, so
adoption.
we just need,
Yeah.
I think, do the one, but we definitely need to get it in there.
but knowing that we
before
got the 23rd, so I guess there's some possibility we'll have to do this sooner.
Okay. Well, then maybe I'll go back to the
Okay,
office straight
staff.
away and get the scheduling going.
Well, and I've certainly been in conversations with our manager at Reno, and I would hope that members here would also be coordinated with their managers, as I understand it, and not to discuss the item, but there seems to be an interest in trying to get together quickly and figure this out, so let's do that, so that we're not tying things up too much, and we don't want to slow anybody's adoption process at the jurisdictions, but yeah. Okay, well, thank you for,
Absolutely.
thanks for the flexibility and for working on this one.
Thank you.
I
Anything
have
else on
nothing
that one?
further, no, sir.
Okay. 7C, we're not going to have. 8, requests for future agenda items. Seeing none, closing public comment, number 9.
Yeah, we have 2. We have Tammy Holt still, and then Kathy Brandhorst after that.
Okay.
Tammy Holdstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee. For final comments, one of the things that a lot of our Sparks jurisdiction has not been able to see or hear about, I have put together. This is our Bible of research, and this is only pertinent research. There's a lot of other research out there, but this little book right here, if you're interested in finding out more about Lemon Valley, Swan Lake, and the issues out there, this book is available. Just contact me, and I will see about getting you a digital copy. Okay? And thank you.
Okay, Ms. Brandhorst?
My name is Kathy Brandhorst, and I am the United States President. I just wanted to give you an example of what could happen to you, or maybe it just happened to me. My home sells under condemned. My walls were filled with bullet holes, and so are my windows. I was also shot down in my kitchen. I just wanted to let you know that the rooftop did fall in also because of the bullet holes. So I did not have the money to fix it at all. I didn't have no money whatsoever to fix that apartment. And 2 young children who I told you about were sitting outside. They heard about it, and they took whatever they had, money, that is, to fix the apartment. Oh. And it was sold under condemned to those 2 kids. They didn't really have to do it, but they wanted to. I just wanted to give you another example. 2 men were filled with bullet holes to steal their houses on Sky Mountain. They're still homeless. I saw them walk in with their heavy equipment, that would be their luggage and whatever else they could afford, you know, their carts. They were filled with their stuff. And they're still homeless today.
Yes, hope for that.
So I just wanted to give you a couple examples of what could happen, you know, to anybody, but unfortunately it happened to me. And the Truckee Meadows, I just wanted to mention, regional plan. They did help me on this situation, and they kept me on C Street with paying my rent. And so that's why I'm still there. And the children have been homeless because I have to live in their home until I can find something else to live in. And I just wanted to mention this. And these 2 children are still being abused by the 2 adults in number 3. And I wish that somebody would help them survive from that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any written correspondence?
No, sir.
Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Move to adjourn. Got a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, we'll see you next time. Thanks.